I'm RamNexus. I am in the middle of preparing part 2 of my video on the evolution of Skyrim graphics. Over the weekend I did some experimenting with Skyrim on my Xbox One X. The results I came up with are surprising but also quite interesting, and it got me thinking about Starfield's 30 FPS cap on the Xbox Series consoles. The results were interesting but a bit puzzling too. To be honest, I just don't understand everything I saw, but I felt the need to share what I found right away, hence this small video. So let me explain. Skyrim on Xbox One X runs at 4K resolution and at 30 frames a second. In fact, it is a rock solid 30 frames a second. I believe it achieves this by using dynamic resolution scaling. When the console is pushed to its limits, instead of dropping frames, it will instead lower the resolution of the image. It's quite a clever way to ensure smooth gameplay. So when its replacement console came out, the Xbox Series X, Skyrim initially ran in a kind of backwards compatibility mode, which means it was still running 30 frames a second, not the 60 frames a second that people were hoping for. There were grumbles about this at the time, since the Series X console had more grunt under the hood, and yet there was no improvement in performance of Skyrim over the previous generation console. However, one of the unusual and awesome features of Skyrim on consoles is that it can be modded. You might see where I'm going here. At the time, some genius came out with a mod for the Xbox Series consoles which removed the 30 FPS cap, allowing the game to take advantage of the additional horsepower the Series consoles provided. Those awesome people over at Digital Foundry took a look at this mod, and with this fan-made 60 FPS mod installed, Skyrim could indeed hit 60 FPS in 4K when run on a Series X console. Not all the time, but the results were very impressive. Now, I recommend you check out their YouTube channel and website, though if you're watching this video, you've likely heard of them already. Bethesda did respond to this, but I'll explain what happened in my Evolution of Skyrim's Graphics Part 2 video, which is in preparation now. But the question on my mind over the weekend was, what would happen to Skyrim on the Xbox One X if I ran the Xbox Series X 60 FPS mod? Sure, this mod is designed for the Series consoles, but it does install and run on the older Xbox One X, so I did just that. Now, before I show you the footage, I want to report one other thing that happened when I ran this mod. My Xbox One X got really loud. Loud because the cooling fan kicked in and was running flat out, more so than if I just ran Skyrim normally. As such, I do not recommend that you do what I did. Worst case is that you may destroy your beloved console. Well, here's what happened. I'll show you the raw footage first. Notice anything? If you said a bucket load of screen tearing, then yeah, I'd agree. But I wanted to know what the performance was like. I wanted to see the numbers. To test performance, I recorded 2 videos, 1 minute of gameplay footage without any mods, and 1 minute with just the 60 FPS mod installed on my One X. Here's a quick tech summary of what I did. My Xbox One X was set to output at 4K resolution, 60 frames a second in standard dynamic range, with my new fandangled Elgato 4K 60 Pro Mark II capture card. Footage was recorded on my PC using OBS Studio at 4K 60 frames a second in lossless quality. Here's a fun fact. Just 1 minute of lossless 4K 60 video generated a whopping 16 gigabyte file. I then used teardrop on the 2 videos to measure frame rate, screen tearing, and frame timing. I recorded gameplay of me fighting a dragon, its breath weapon attack, and my movement are known to tax the game engine significantly. Obviously, the footage of combat is very different between the 2 videos, just due to the chaotic nature of the battlefield. Right, here's the gameplay footage of Skyrim with no mods. Solid 30 frames a second. Nice. Note that although teardrop analysed the 4K 60 uncompressed files, I only set the teardrop output to 540p just to save me some time in analysis and hard drive space, which is why it looks a little bit blurry. The results would be the same though, regardless of what output resolution I set it to. And here's the footage with the 60 FPS mod enabled on my Xbox One X with the teardrop analysis overlaid. What you should easily notice is that as we earlier saw it with the naked eye. Teardrop identified and marked a lot of screen tearing. It also reported a fairly constant frame time of 16.67 milliseconds, which is normal for a 60 FPS output. A quick look at this side-by-side video, you can see that the unmodded vanilla Skyrim is running at 30 frames a second with the expected 33.34 millisecond frame time. All good. However, and this is the bit that I don't understand, the actual FPS reported with the unlocked FPS mod is actually lower than the locked 30 frames per second version. How can this be? Surely Skyrim, released from the shackles of 30 frames per second, would increase its frame rate. It occurs to me that perhaps the mod also removes the variable refresh rate function that I mentioned above. If that's the case, then it might explain the less than 30 frames per second result that we're seeing. The answer may have something to do with the large frame tearing you can see. Even looking at the raw frames, you can see a pattern to the black line tearing, which suggests to me it is running somewhere between 30 and 60 frames a second. Okay, so ignoring the actual FPS results for a minute, what we can see with this mod is, I believe, Skyrim running at a frame rate fluctuating between 40 and 50 in a 60 frames per second feed. But since there is no VSync or VSync can't cope, there is a large amount of screen tearing. I am also reminded that Skyrim is a game where the physics and animation are linked to frame rate. Many players have seen issues running their game in unorthodox frame rates. I understand this is actually due to the impact these FPS changes have on the scripting engine, Papyrus. As such, even if we didn't see such egregious tearing due to the mod, I can't help but wonder if the game would have been impacted in other ways. The 60 FPS mod, designed for Xbox Series consoles, does not improve the Skyrim gameplay when used on the Xbox One X. The tearing was over the top and very distracting. Playing Skyrim at 30 frames per second was far more satisfying. Which brings me to my final point. In my last video, the Evolution of Skyrim Graphics Part 1, I mentioned that although it is disappointing Todd Howard announced Starfield will run at a capped 30 frames a second on the Xbox Series consoles, I recalled that Skyrim also started life as a 30 FPS game. But today, with the right kit, you could play Skyrim at 60 frames a second, 4K resolution, in high dynamic range and variable refresh rate and low latency mode enabled. I predict similar improvements to Starfield will occur over its lifetime. I am not suggesting for a second that uncapping Starfield's refresh rate will result in the mess we saw here today with Skyrim. Boy, I'm not even sure I understand the result. But what we saw is compelling evidence to keep Skyrim capped at 30 frames per second on Xbox One X. I believe there is likely just as compelling a reason to cap Starfield. Thanks heaps. Thanks big time. Thanks a lot for watching. I am very grateful for you choosing to spend your time watching this video. A like would really be appreciated. Subscribe if you want to see some more videos that I'm going to be putting out. But now it's time to go. Cheers. RamNexus out.